Hey everyone, it's Brad. Hope you're having a great day. I've got another tip for you today on how to make better and faster data-driven decisions. Today's tip is addressing a problem I see with a lot of leaders. And the problem is we often lose the story that we're trying to manage and trying to understand because we start going too deep into the data. Now, I'm not saying that we're going deep in the data because we're trying to get a better understanding of the data. Sometimes that's necessary. The times I'm talking about is when we start to drill into the data because we want to see if our teams got the analysis right. That's a problem. And it's a really big problem because it slows down decision making. If your team has done the analysis and you need to look at the data and basically redo the analysis, you've just started the process over. It's also really unempowering because let me show you what you're really saying to your team when you ask to see the data. So imagine that they have a simple recommendation for you that we have to revise our employee engagement strategy. And they've given you these 3 bullet points. Now, what you should be talking about is, do those 3 bullet points support this conclusion? Do they come together? Are there other considerations that maybe we left out that we should have been thinking about when we were drawing this conclusion? We should be looking at the rationale and the reasoning process that went into the conclusion. That's what you should actually be testing with your team. But instead, we ask people to see the data. And so if you ask someone to see the data for that first question, for that first bullet point that we've been trending down for the past 4 years, what you're really saying to your team is, I'm not sure that you actually were able to figure out, looking at this graph, that the line has gone down for the last 4 years. That's incredibly unempowering. It also doesn't make any sense. If you can't count on your team to extract basic facts from their data, you probably don't have the right team. Or, more likely, they don't have the right leader. You shouldn't be testing whether people could pull facts out, because facts aren't the critical part of making the decision. What you want to find out is, were they able to put these facts together to form some kind of reasonable argument? Because think about how inefficient this is going to be. If I have to look at a graph to figure out if you got that first bullet point right, because I didn't think you can interpret that a line is going down, and then I have to look at a chart full of data to find out if you were able to accurately count up the number of business units that were below target, and then maybe I have to look at another graph to see if you were able to identify the fact that our company was in the bottom 10th percentile, you've just wasted a tremendous amount of time. There's one other problem too, for why this makes your decision-making much less effective. When you're looking at the graph, you think that you're testing sort of whether or not they were able to interpret it right. But what's going to happen is somebody, maybe even you, is going to start asking questions about the graph. That's just human nature. When there's data in front of us, we ask questions about data. So you're going to start asking about, well, what happened in 2002? Then you're going to want to know a little more about what happened in 2005, and then maybe you're going to want to know what happened in 2007. Whenever you see a representation of data, we naturally start asking questions about the data. But that's a problem. Because if I'm having a historical discussion about that one point about what our employee engagement scores have been over the last 10 years, what I'm not talking about is the decision I'm supposed to be making, which is, do I need to revise our employee engagement strategy? When you start getting into the individual data to audit whether your team pulled the right fact out, you also get distracted because you start talking about additional data that's not necessarily relevant to the decision that you're trying to make. It slows down decision making. So instead of getting overly focused and testing your teams on whether or not they could pull facts out of data sets, which 99% of the time they're going to get right, start focusing on testing their thinking and reasoning process. Did they interpret the data correctly? Not did they notice a fact correctly, but did they understand what that fact meant? And did they apply it correctly to the decision-making process? Did they synthesize multiple facts together in an appropriate way? And finally, when they brought those facts together, did they come up with a reasonable and complete conclusion? Those are the things you want to focus on, because if we get those things right, then we know that we're probably making a good decision. In our Rethinking Data workshop, we talk a lot about how do you keep focused on the story without getting lost in the details of the data. You certainly need the data, and we want to make sure we have it available to support what we're saying. But too often, leaders look at data just to find out if their team was able to extract facts. Doing that disempowers your team. It's insulting, quite honestly, and it slows down your own decision-making process. You can learn a lot more about what we're doing in Rethinking Data at my website, www.availadvisors.com. Also, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment window, so please feel free to leave a note down there. And happy decision-making, everybody.